So we've talked about privilege, and we have taught, and the privilege is like, those are like the unearned advantages that we have. And we've talked about unconscious bias. Those are biases that we have that we're not aware of. And so along the lines, and a form of an unconscious bias can be a microaggression. There are some microaggressions that are more evident than others, and I'm going to review that on the next slide. But microaggressions are very subtle and automatic. Just like unconscious bias is automatic, microaggressions are automatic. We do them, we say them without thinking, okay? But they're generally put downs that are directed toward a marginalized group. And they can take the form of compliments. They can be very well intentioned. Let's see. One example, so there's verbal, behavioral, environmental. One example of the verbal microaggression might be saying, "Oh, you're so smart for a woman. You know, you are so smart for a woman. You're an engineer. I can't believe it. I never would have thought that you were an engineer as a woman," right? That's a microaggression. That's saying that, you know, they're a woman, and so they are different than the status quo. And then the behavioral microaggression is when we demonstrate a behavior that marginalizes another group. So that could be, maybe we are a waiter in a restaurant and we tend to serve people of color last, or we don't hold them at the same priority as if we were to see a white male enter the room. And then finally, we have environmental, and that's a more subtle microaggression that happens in society, which, you know, could be like on a college campus, a professor, you know, calling on the males first before the females. Or a college campus that has buildings that are only named after white men. Okay? So there are different forms of microaggressions, micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations. Micro assaults are exactly how they sound. They're aggressive. They are verbal or nonverbal attacks. Okay, so these are a little bit more obvious. The micro assaults would be more along the lines of a conscious bias. Okay, and that can include name calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory behavior. I have a picture of a car here because micro assaults make me think of bumper stickers. Oftentimes people have bumper stickers that show passions they have, beliefs they have, and sometimes those bumper stickers can be pretty aggressive. And I live in Idaho, which is a very rural state. And where I live specifically is in Meridian, so it's a little bit more suburban, heavy populated, but we have a lot of bumper stickers around here that could be really offensive to particular groups of people. So that was what I thought of when I think of micro assaults. Micro insults are more subtle. They're subtle and automatic comments and actions. And micro invalidations are just comments that invalidate a person's experience and identity. Okay? So all of these three terms were coined by a man by the name of Daryl Wing Sue, and he's referenced here, and he's got so many articles out about this stuff, and it's super, super interesting stuff. I'd highly recommend you read it if you're interested in it, but he's the one that kind of coined these first three terms and really did a lot of research around the impact that these terms have. And when he originally coined it, these terms were specifically about race, microaggressions surrounding race, but have since been expanded to include race, gender, and sexual orientation. So here are some really good examples. Okay, so you see the person on the left, an Asian female, possibly asking some of these questions. Where are you from? That's wrong because you're assuming that this person is not from, if she's in the United States, is not from the United States, right? You're assuming that she's from some other country when in reality she could be an American-born Asian female, right? You speak English really well. Again, assuming that she's from another country or just because she's Asian, she doesn't speak English very well. I bet you're really good at math. Stereotypical, right? Asians are good at math and science. Well-intentioned comments, trying to be compliments, but the hidden message is discriminatory in nature. Again, the next female, she's got a stethoscope, scrubs on, automatically assuming that she's a nurse. And because she's black, you must have worked hard to get here, assuming that she comes from a disadvantaged background. Finally, we have a gay couple publicly showing affection to one another, and you saying, I don't care if they're gay, I just wish they wouldn't do that in public. Hidden message there, it's not okay to show public affection in public unless you're a heterosexual, right? Or saying things like, it's too bad that you'll never be able to have kids, right? I mean, those are comments that could be interpreted as like you're trying to be nice, right? But they're really the hidden message, the underlying hidden message is very discriminatory in nature and hurtful. All right, so why is all this important? Like I mentioned, most microaggressions are said with good intentions. The intention is not to offend anybody, and the person saying the microaggression often is just unaware that what they're saying could be considered to be offensive. Okay? So microaggressions are very subtle. They can oftentimes take the form of compliments, and a person by the name of Colleen Harrison and Kimberly Tanner did a really good job of kind of metaphorizing microaggressions. And so what they said in their article, Language Matters, considering microaggressions in science specifically, they were looking at how the impact plays into scientific educations. But they basically said this. Imagine that someone is poking you with their finger. The physical impact of this poke might range from something mildly annoying to harmless, right? You might not think much about these little pokes. If you're poked infrequently, you might not think much about it, right? But if you're poked often, eventually that poke is going to start to be really annoying, okay? And eventually it's going to become a burden. You might start becoming wary of others in fear that they might poke you. Being poked could result in persistent problems. If you keep being poked in the same spot, a bruise might form. Okay? Or if you are poked in an area where there was a previous injury, that's going to cause further damage. Okay? And eventually all these pokes are going to have an impact on a person's ability to focus, concentrate. It's going to start really wearing them down, right? If you're a student who's constantly poked by teachers, you're not going to be able to focus in school, right? You're going to be worried about being poked again. And so I really thought that that metaphor was very similar to the title of this presentation, paper cuts. Paper cuts, I think paper cuts are super, super annoying. Like they're super small, they're super subtle, but they really hurt, right? Paper cuts are really annoying. If you get a paper cut, it'll eventually heal. But if you can, the more paper cuts, or if you get multiple paper cuts in the same spot, that's really going to cause a big wound, right? And so over time, those paper cuts are going to become a big cut, a big deal. So according to Dr. Sue, and that analogy was straight from the article that I just mentioned, I cannot remember the name of it, Language Matters, Considering the Microaggressions in Science. So that whole metaphor experience was directly from that. That's not original thought at all. But according to Dr. Sue, research suggests that these micro insults can potentially be more harmful because of their invisibility and subtleness. Micro assaults can be more harmful because of their invisibility. Oftentimes, perpetrators are unaware that they've offended somebody, that they've caused this microaggression, and then it can further perpetuate microaggressions from continuing in the future.